So this isn't a video that I really was expecting to do, at least not at this point in time, but it has sort of been spawned by some events that occurred recently, and I figured it would be good to address now rather than wait until later. So this will look a little bit different. I'm not going to have an intro or anything like that, but I'm just going to run through. There's no script, there's no real editing going on behind the scenes here, and I'm just going to talk through this issue. It's the question of really, well, how do we deal with personal insults? This is something that, let's face it, we are going to experience throughout our lives when we engage with other people regarding our faith. And there's some pretty nasty people out there who their real only goal is to insult us, and it can be pretty hard to cope with. It can be hard to deal with at times. And if you're going to be involved with sharing your faith at all, well, this is something that you're going to have to learn how to deal with. And the specific circumstances here come from a video that I posted a few days ago about the question of, well, what is atheism? That was what I was going through. And I'll link to that video in the description, but it effectively was a video that covered the following. I provided some sort of background that Christians often get caught off guard when they run into atheists, that is, that define atheism as a mere lack of belief. Then I go into this sort of philosophical analysis about how the word atheism is fundamentally tied to the word theism and the implications that that has on the discussion when it comes to what is atheism. And I encourage my audience to really bring that up when someone comes up with this definition of atheism that is just a mere lack of belief instead of a belief that there is no God, that they mention the consequences that arise from that distinction. And then I linked in the comments to that to an article in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy that further dives into this description, this discussion, this real argument that I gave in the video in summary. And I'll link to that Stanford article as well. But the result from that was this flurry of angry comments. We're talking pretty much insults, vulgar language, mockery of the Christian faith, Christian beliefs, and just mockery of Christians in general. And what is particularly lacking in those comments is really any sort of constructive engagement with the topic of the video, with anything I said or with anything that was said in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Now, there were a handful of comments here or there that actually did engage with that, and I tried to address some of them. But that's the key. When it comes to these sorts of insulting comments, what is that person really getting at, and how do we respond to them? I mean, am I going to just walk away, someone calls me an idiot, a numbskull, that sort of thing? Christians are just deluded and eventually religion will be wiped off the face of the earth. Now, these are the sorts of things that you're going to hear, and it's not from everyone who's an atheist, it's not from everyone who disagrees with you, but it's from a very particular breed of atheists on the internet who are pretty well organized and will come and attack anyone who they think is making some sort of case for the Christian faith. And I encourage you, if you feel up to it, to actually go and scroll through the comments of that video on what is atheism and really see for yourself the types of comments that are being made. And you can make the comparison. None of these people are really addressing the points made in the video, and I suspect that I know why. There was someone who made a response video, and the person was pretty belligerent in the comments section, so I'm not really interested in looking at the video itself, but he titled it something like, "Your definitions are unfair. A theist describes atheism," right? So he's trying to put words into my mouth about me saying that I was complaining about the definition of atheism, and that's the whole point of my video. And my guess is that's where these people are getting this idea from, because the analytics of the video show an audience retention of less than 25% of the 6-minute video, which means people are coming to my video providing attacks, insults, comments like that without actually even watching the video itself. So That's the thing that you need to understand. When someone comes at you and all they want to do is insult you, they have no interest in actually understanding you. They have no interest in understanding what it is you're saying, where it is you're coming from, what your goals are. Their goal is to hurt. Their goal is to attack. And I'm not going to get into the psychology of what that takes to be at that point in your life where that's all you care about, but that's ultimately where these insults are coming from. They're not from a place of intellectual consideration. They're not thoughtful. They're not academic in any sort of sense. They're visceral. They're emotional. And although they'll veil it in language like, oh, you're not smart, you're not smart like I am. If you had read as many books or something like that, maybe you should educate yourself, read a dictionary, these sorts of things that are sort of meant to imply that they have the intellectual upper ground. The mere fact that they're resorting to insult is a pure demonstration that they are not coming from a place of intellect when they are putting this response out there. They might be very intelligent people, and probably some of them are, but the point is, the attacks, the insults, are not a function of intellect. They're not a function of this individual's intelligence. They're a function of their emotions. They might be personally hurt. They might know someone who's been personally hurt. They might just be an angry person. But the key is, you're not going to get anywhere with them by trying to engage with them on the subject matter because they have no interest in engaging with the subject matter. The point that you need to emphasize is you have no interest in engaging with someone who's going to be belligerent with you. So if they're going to insult you, that's it. That's the end of the conversation. They might feel like they've won, or they might walk away saying they've won, but the reality is, if all they've done is insult you, well, they've shown their cards. They've demonstrated that they have nothing of substance to bring to the table, because if they did, that's what they'd have started with. And if they chose to start with insults when they really had substance, well, that right there is a maturity problem. And we need to be conscious about who we engage with and where we spend our time. And really, ultimately, what we let affect us as individuals. So if you come across someone who's just attacking you, walk away. There's no need to engage with them because they've given you nothing to work with, nothing of substance. And I'm going to bring something up here. It's an article. It was written on the Worldview Bulletin. There's a link. I'll put it in the description as well. But it put it, in my opinion, pretty perfectly. It says, "My goal is not to crush an opponent, but to listen and learn, and to share what I think and the reasons why, but without insisting that they immediately see it my way. I try to have confidence in the truth to make itself known, to them and to me, and for the Holy Spirit to operate in people's hearts and minds. I know that I myself am not always immediately convinced by even good arguments. I need not tell people or even subtly intimate that if they disagree with me or remain unpersuaded by my argument, that they are silly or stupid, irrational or perverse. Doing such a thing is hardly a good example of loving my neighbor as myself." And that's what it really comes down to. If you want to sort of respond in kind with the insults, with the attacks, that's what you're trying to protect against. So if you want to love your neighbors yourself, and that's what your go-to response would be, attack them back, then you need to walk away to protect both them and you. But then just be conscious about who you engage with, why you engage with them, and what it is that you're saying. So to really summarize this, the answer to the question of how do you deal with insults, recognize that, one, they're not actually responding to you. When they're insulting you, they're just trying to exert some sort of power, some sort of attack, and it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your arguments. It really has to do with them, their character, whatever understanding they have, wherever they're at in their life. That's where the insults are coming from, and that's what they have to do with. So who cares if they insult you? Just brush it off. And then just respond. Take a look at your arguments, right? Do you trust the arguments you've made? I take a look at the argument and say, look, no one's responding in a way that actually takes down what I said or what is said in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So why should I care about the insult when no one has actually addressed the subject matter? And just trust, I guess, finally, that the Holy Spirit will guide those who are actually seeking truth, both for you, that if there is an issue in the argument you present, or if you are doing something in a way you shouldn't, that the Holy Spirit convicts you of that and shows you the right way. And trust that if this individual who is insulting you eventually comes to a point where they're honestly seeking truth, right? That they can open up their hearts and minds, that the Holy Spirit will work through them. And maybe at that point, they can understand the argument that you made, the description you gave, whatever it may be that immediately caused the insults to start flowing. And who knows, the Holy Spirit certainly can work in that sort of situation. So just trust that the Holy Spirit can and will work in those who are honestly seeking. So this has been a long answer to a question that really should be pretty simple. But if you find yourself in this position where someone's insulting you and you sort of get this emotional response, just remember these things. It's not about you. The attacks are about them. You don't have an obligation to engage with someone who isn't going to respect you. And the Holy Spirit is ultimately the one who's going to work in their hearts and in their minds. They have to be willing to listen. And if they're in a point where they're just insulting you, then quite frankly, they're not at that point where they're willing to listen. So brush them off, walk away, do whatever you need to do to move on and engage with those people who are actually showing that they care about what you had to say and are actually showing that they care about who you are and honestly want to get a deeper understanding of what it is you're saying, where it is you're coming from. Those are the people we need to spend our time engaging with, not the people who are just attacking us. So I'm going to sign off here. That's the end of this little monologue. But if you like more of this, if you want to see more of these types of conversations, this type of content, please subscribe here at Catalyzing Faith. Push like on this video, share it, show it with anyone who you think might benefit from it. But I'd really appreciate the support, and I hope that you found this beneficial.